Welcome back to Sociology 227. This is Pierre Bourdieu, video 1. My weekend isn't going very well. It's currently Sunday. My mic broke. I got to use these AirPods. It's okay. I'm still going to get you that content you need. In this video, I have 3 goals. The first is to tell you about the life of Pierre Bourdieu. This is important for his sociological project. Next, I'm going to tell you about some of Bourdieu's concepts. These include habitus, field, and capital. Finally, I'm going to get you ready to do the readings. Let's do it. Here we have Pierre Bourdieu. As you can see, he has a very French look on his face. I wore my turtleneck for this video to match his energy. Bourdieu's origins are important to understand what he's trying to do with his sociological project. He's born in the middle of nowhere, the son of a postman. As he entered the academic world, he was always immediately interested in how class differences manifested in the thought and actions of the people around him. Class is performed. France's education system is highly regimented, with a whole lot of very strict examinations to determine where you rank in the system. Class is also enforced. Bourdieu himself does very well, eventually finding himself at the highest rank of the French academic system, at the École Normale Supérieure. Even though he is of humble class origins, and was never made to forget this, Bourdieu must adopt the mannerisms of the French academic class. Based on his horrendously pretentious writing style, suffice it to say that he succeeded. Bourdieu does his obligatory military service in Algeria and takes a keen interest in how the Kabyle Berbers dealt with France as a colonial power. What's important here for us is that Bourdieu takes questions of class and capitalism as central to his analysis of society, but also that it is empirical and ethnographic. When something is empirical, it is observed by the senses. We typically use the term to talk about data, quantitative, qualitative, etc. When we say ethnographic, we're saying that Bourdieu uses anthropological methods to prove his theories of society. He was embedded. Unlike many of the people we have talked about in my theory courses, then, Bourdieu's analysis of the social structure takes place by observing it directly with his own eyes, rather than simply through document analysis, reading through stats, etc. Statistics is empirical, but it is not ethnographic. Bourdieu's practice of sociology is rooted in direct observation. I think 3 things are important here. 1, an interest in class. 2, an interest in education and reproducing a legitimate vision of the world. And 3, considering sociology as a direct observational practice. Crucial to understanding what Bourdieu is trying to do is the agency-structure debate. This is an oversimplification, but think about a first-person account of social structure versus a third-person account. We have 2 very different understandings of social relations going on, from 2 different positions. Not hard and fast, but each position shapes the kinds of questions that the thinkers pose. Let me show you what I mean by looking at other thinkers we've seen in these 2 courses. The first camp is interested in objective social relations. Here the goal is to get the basic facts of a society to explain the way its members act. Here I have placed Karl Marx and Durkheim as the chief members of this tradition. Why? Well, both through social facts and material conditions, they want to argue that we can answer pretty much every important question about society through structure. These are questions with third-person answers. Why am I poor? Structure. Why am I so depressed? Structure. Structure, structure, structure. Marx's interest in structure comes in class, capital, and the social formation of value. Durkheim's interest in structure comes in the objective science of moral attachments. In both cases, the focus is on structures that determine action. Then there are those that are focused on subjective social relations, how we interpret action and how we find meaning. Here, the actor is the unit of analysis, albeit one who receives direction and inspiration from the social order. So we are more interested in why a person takes one form of action over the other. Here it is individual and not collective behavior that needs to be explained. How do I manage myself around others if I feel depressed? What led me to cancel Netflix? Here we are focused on interpretation at all times. Valuation, understanding, mindset. These are all first-person states, or at best, second. Weber's approach is subjective, looking for how we follow authority, legitimacy, and the social organization of rationality. Goffman's approach is subjective by following around interpersonal interaction and impression management. I want you guys to understand this in terms of agency and structure. Interpretive sociology seeks to explain agency as manifest in individual courses of action. Objective social science seeks to explain actions on a prevailing social structure that guides them. Now, these are two poles rather than a strict division, but we can definitely see that the kinds of questions that we ask are vastly different based on the emphasis on structure or agency. Let me give you an example, and put on a coat because we're going north of Princess. Here's a screenshot documenting your instructor, Dr. Thomas Abrams, planning his daily trip to Big Bites to buy 2 hot dogs for the low, low price of $3, back when you could do such important things so easily. We'll focus on the ride, not the destination. We've already talked a bit about platforms like Uber in the Harvey video. So what does an objective social scientist look to do in explaining how Uber works? Marx looks at how labor is divided using Uber, how particular structural conditions manifest in ride-sharing. Like Marx, Harvey would be interested in the way that neoliberal social relations continue to structure social arrangements, how they make an obscene amount of money for particular people at the expense of others. Durkheim would suggest that the kind of neoliberal social relations related to Uber show a developed society, how it addresses the needs of the social form. Dorothy Smith is interested in the relations of ruling, the gendered position of the Uber driver, the costs borne by her or the partner at home. Sorry, daydreaming about hot dogs. Let's look at the subjective side of things. Things are different when we look at Uber from the position of so-called interpretive sociologists. These are the people who would look at the conscious choice of taking an Uber, how one manages impressions driving the car, or why one chooses to place themselves in such a precarious position in the economy, and for what reason. Weber would be interested in how one maintains order in a car that doesn't have the sanction of a company, and in the choice to take an Uber over a cab. Erving Goffman is interested in how the Uber driver would manage your impression in order to ensure a 5-star ride. How does the cab structure change based on the type of client you engage with? What are the informal cues that you follow? Garfinkel is interested in how we do a routine cab ride in ways that we don't really express. Further, he'd be interested in the tacit nature of trust flowing through the experience and how one knows when things have gone awry, and what one does when they do to bring things back in line. So we have the same Uber ride, but different perspectives for exploring it. Bourdieu is trying to look at both agency and structure at once. He's trying to establish a sociology of position and disposition. That looks at an objective position within the social structure and also how we incorporate that objective position into the ways that individual actors make meaning and how individual actors navigate these moments. He's also interested in the class basis of consumption. If you take courses in consumer culture here at Queen's Sociology, you will talk about Bourdieu. I promise. 3 themes and related questions flow through Bourdieu's work. The first we've already come up against. How is it possible to address both individual motivations and collective actions at once without dismissing one at the expense of the other? Here, Bourdieu is in a long line of sociologists who want to ask how we can do exactly this. Talcott Parsons, for example, wanted to address situated action. He was, however, far less interested in applying this in particular locations. He wanted the general theory of society, whereas Bourdieu is looking for an experientially situated theory of practice to be applied to places like education and to culture and consumption. So, how do people act within a class-stratified education system, for instance? Next, embodiment. Starting with Marcel Mauss, Durkheim's nephew, sociology has been interested in the body as a site of social action and something that plays an active role in the kind of world we live in. For someone like Foucault, the body is usually shaped, molded, and manipulated in the way that a particular constituting power desires. In this case, Bourdieu is closer to someone like Goffman, who wants to see how the body-bound agent actively shapes their behavior. Bourdieu insists we explore the bodily styles we use in all human conduct. Think about how one shows off social class and how they walk, or eat, or speak. Finally, reflexivity. Based on his own personal history, Bourdieu is interested in how the educational sphere reproduces itself and dominant class interests. In this sense, he is close to Marx. He is not close to Marx, however, insofar as he's interested in how social status and hierarchy are deployed by particular members in order to navigate the educational arena. So it isn't necessarily a sociology of oppression and exclusion, but rather one of navigation. The sociologist has to think about how she navigates class structures as she studies others doing the same. In each case, Bourdieu's sociology is one of position and disposition. How do social structures come to shape us, and how do we express ourselves through socially structured action? Position and disposition. Remember that. Bourdieu uses two concepts to navigate agency and structure. I think the most important concept we get from Bourdieu is habitus. You can get what the term comes from. Latin for habit. Here Bourdieu is referring to a particular pre-reflexive disposition, a way of talking, of using one's body, and of acting that we present almost as second nature. For Bourdieu, habitus is an entry point into the world of agency and structure. Particular social structures have learned habits that demonstrate proficiency, not only in the ability to do something, but to do it in a recognized style. Here, for instance, we have Serena Williams and Roger Federer. The ability to play tennis requires particular habits to be built. One can show one's mastery in the game of tennis in this bodily style. As one becomes more proficient at the game, you can perform them with flair, poorly, etc. These are learned, acted out dispositions that people have in order to do tennis. Bourdieu wants us to think about the class basis of these dispositions. They are not distributed evenly. The second concept is field, the social space where these habits are learned, meaningful, or deployed. Think about the social space in which tennis is played. There exists a set of collectively agreed rules that govern tennis, but also the surface on which tennis takes place, and a spectacle that others observe. Each field has a set of rules of the game that we follow. Here we must also think of the world of endorsements, the class pretensions that are accompanying the game, and the way that particular players are welcomed to the game. The Williams sisters, if you recall sports history, weren't welcome to participate fully in the game. The whitewashed country club tennis world did not accept them. This had nothing to do with their immense talents. Here I want you to think about the twin concepts of agency and structure. Tennis is a socially structured activity, and we want to see how different players express themselves on that terrain. To begin, we need to think in terms of commodities like Marx. Marx says that the commodity is a social object. It only has a value insofar as it is worth something else. Bourdieu takes Marx's understanding of capital and gives it multiple forms. Bourdieu comes up with various types of capital, economic, social, cultural, and symbolic, that one mobilizes. Their value depends on the social space where you currently reside, like a classroom or a basketball court. Marx's capital refers to machines, value, and commodities. Bourdieu wants us to explore how the types of capital relate, the various fields where they are used, and how collective action and dispositions are shaped accordingly. One of the ways we can explore how various classes operate on the symbolic economy are on the particular goods people buy and the styles in which those things are consumed, explored, and cultivated. We express social class not only based on what we buy, but how we do so. Let's think about the best commodity in the world, wine. Bougie professors like myself drink wine and go to wine tastings because we are boring and need to show off our knowledge at all times. Wine consumption and wine knowledge is another area of symbolic struggle. Think of some of the corporeal styles involved in wine tasting. What sort of words get used to describe the wine? What happens when you order a bottle at the restaurant? How can we tell if a wine is good? We can treat the world of wine and the world of wine tasting as a symbolic economy. It isn't simply about having the means to enter the place, the winery, or to afford it, the bottle, but also the way we deploy ourselves in that particular arena. What's important to note here is that there's nothing inherently fine about a particular wine, if we think about it in terms of the symbolic economy. This way of thinking is what shaped Bourdieu's big important book, Distinction, and how the French class structure was represented in the consumption of particular goods. The idea that taste is socially organized really blew up the idea that the finer things in life are just that, finer than others. In short, cultural consumption itself is an example of position and disposition, where agency and structure come into contact and clash. I'm not saying this to ruin your favorite pastime, drinking. Rather, I want to say there's a whole social world of wine consumption and wine knowledge, and this is a place where we can apply Bourdieu's thought. Next, it's your turn to do the readings and think about clothing norms in the hospital. See you in the next video.